Welcome, my friends, to the Gracious Guest Show, the Gracious Guest Podcast, and I am your humble host, Mike Creevy. This is kind of a mixed theme episode in some ways. It's going to be pretty brief, too, but as you've no doubt seen from the title, this show is called You Can Run, but You Can't Hide. And we all know that phrase. We've heard it so many times, but really, it's a theme that jumped into my mind a couple times when I was just considering a couple different movies and a book that I read a while back. And I'm not really sure why the theme kept popping in my head, but I thought, hey, you know what? That kind of sounds like a decent show theme. And so that's what I decided to do this time. So that's what you're listening to here today. So. And, you know, I guess what I'm really thinking about, what really came to mind a lot with this was I was reflecting on this recurring theme of the inability, well, people making an attempt, let me put it that way, let me start there, making an attempt to not just turn over a new leaf, make a change, but kind of radically, in some sense, trying to escape. Whether that's them trying to escape the past, escape an old relationship that was less than ideal, escape a humdrum kind of life, or even escape something like persecution, or to escape a lot of the influences that we see in our culture, what have you. So that's a theme that we see in a lot of different forms of human art, okay, movies, books, and a lot of other different forms as well. And the film that I was thinking of really with this was The Village. And a lot of people criticize that movie. I know it's not maybe a lot of people's favorite M. Night Shyamalan movie. I've always really enjoyed it. And I'm not here to, kind of get into any of the spoilers or any of the twists in it and that kind of thing. But you see very early on in that film, it's from, I think it was 2004 it came out, so go check it out if you haven't seen it before. Again, I'm not going to spoil anything, but in that film, you start off with this sort of late 19th century group of people, and you kind of gather as you watch the film, as the film unfolds, that everybody in that town, this sort of older generation, everybody in the village is there because they're fleeing some kind of pain, some kind of tragedy, some kind of terrible situation that they wanted to, escape from in one way, shape, or form. And then, we gradually see then, of course, throughout the movie, the fact that, or at least the suggestion that, is that really even possible? Not that we shouldn't try, certainly to change things in our lives that need to be changed, or to get away from negative influences, or certainly violent influences, or things like that, self-destructive influences. But, there's this sort of invitation, in a sense, as you watch that film, to consider how much of, certainly from maybe the Christian standpoint, sin and our own vulnerability and that kind of thing, how much of that can really be escaped versus how much of it do we have to find a way to face. Now, maybe facing that is, precisely what we're doing when we get away from it. So I deal with some sort of addiction or some sort of negative influence, or like I said earlier, like a certainly if it's a violent relationship, you have to get away from that, or you have to take steps to sort of turn the tide, go against the current, so to speak, because the current's just always going to keep flowing that way. But by the same token, if we're trying to escape to some kind of utopian, notion of reality, if I think that I can carve out some kind of human life where I'm never, ever going to have to face suffering or death or those sorts of things, I'm really kidding myself, and it can really be very destructive. And even more tragic if I think I can escape that. There's another great movie, again, that not necessarily everybody would agree with that, but I think it's just a classic kind of simple Western that came out long after the big era of Hollywood Westerns was kind of over, from, I think, around 2002 or 3, I want to say, called Open Range, with Kevin Costner and Robert Duvall, among others. Brian Gammon's in it as well, and it's a good movie. It's got a lot of really interesting stuff in it. But at one point, Kevin Costner, we don't know much about him. He works with Robert Duvall's character, and they're these sort of free grazers who are out kind of on the plains, and they have their herd, and just kind of they move through, and they never really put down roots. And not everybody likes that, but they kind of go along. They seem to be decent guys. But Kevin Costner seems to have a dark side, that there's some history, there's some, past he's trying to avoid. And at one point he even says, he has sort of this outburst at one point, and he says to this one character, I think is it Annette Bening who plays her? I can't remember. I think so. His sort of love interest. And he says to her that he's tried to put some bad times behind him, but some things just don't want to stay put. There's this idea that your sins from the past coming back to haunt you, and that kind of thing. And that's a common theme. And you see that a lot in this book I wanted to mention. I'll probably do a full review of it at a later date, but this book called Voyage to Alpha Centauri, the star Alpha Centauri. So it's Voyage to Alpha Centauri by Michael D. O'Brien, who's really just a Renaissance man. He's an author from Canada. He's an artist as well. He's self-taught. Pretty much in everything, which is pretty incredible. And what else does he do? He's an iconographer, he's a painter, he's a writer, and he's written a lot of different stuff. The Father Elijah series, which was very interesting. It's kind of like an apocalyptic, sort of a novel. He writes a lot of novels. And this book, Voyage to Alpha Centauri, I want to say it came out like 2013? Yeah, 2013. So relatively new, from Ignatius Press. You can get it on Amazon or different places, but it's a big, thick book. It's like, what do we got here? Over almost 600 pages or so. And it's just a really, really, really good book. And it's one of my favorites. I couldn't put it down. And it's set 80 years in the future. And the notion behind this story is that there's a ship called the Cosmos, which is this interstellar ship. And the main character is Neil de Hoyos, who is a physicist, and he's an older gentleman from New Mexico, who in his youth helped to pioneer a lot of the theorems that kind of went into developing this ship itself. And now, as kind of a reward for all of his work, years before, he's given a chance to go on this ship with all these people, hundreds and hundreds of people, scientists and experts and all these different folks, who are going to be the first voyage of mankind to a planet near Alpha Centauri. The flight itself is going to take somewhere around 10 years or so to get there, and then 10 years back with a little time there. So it's this big commitment, and there's all these people from all these different walks of life and from all around the world who go on this flight. And what's amazing is it's such a good science fiction story, but it's so much more than that, because the themes, like it's kind of a slow read sometimes, but it's like that on purpose, and it's largely written in kind of journal format, where it's like his journal entries for probably the first at least half, 2/3 of the book, and then after that it kind of shifts gears a little bit and jumps ahead somewhat, but we see all of the baggage that all of these people bring with them, and like I said, I want to do another review of this at some point, so I won't ruin any more of like the plot, but that theme is all throughout this book, that all of the things on Earth that so many of these people in this book are trying to escape, they're bringing it all with them, backbiting, political infighting, intrigue, all sorts of agendas, and murder and rape and theft and just all of this dark side of humanity. It's like our shadow. It follows us everywhere we go. So that's what this theme kept jumping out at me. You can run, but you can't hide. And I thought, why does that show up, and why does that resonate so much, at least with me? And I think that's really at the core what it is. It's this idea that we all have a destiny. And you can go a few ways with this. I think a lot of people can go the route of being super depressed, right, or completely just abdicating, their entire human experience to just the junk heap, just tossing it out. Hey, there is no meaning to life, and it's pretty dark out there, right? You look out and you see all that terrible stuff going on in the world, and it's very easy. We're all tempted to it all the time. So I'm not preaching. I'm admitting it's very difficult to imagine kind of going a different way, than just complete despair. But by the same token, I think what's really great about a lot of these stories, and certainly a lot of these stories will go that route, and kind of just leave it there, right? And like, well, that's that. Life sucks. What are you what are you gonna do? But by the same token, I think Voyage to Alpha Centauri, The Village, other stories really get at it well. I think when they don't stop there, and when they're able to admit and dig deep and go through the sort of journey of vulnerability, our vulnerability, our realization, as scared as we are, that we have to turn and face what's chasing us, and sort of go face to face with it, to recognize where we're weak. And hey, you know what? Maybe I can't do certain things. Maybe I can't go certain places. Maybe it's even certain places that aren't bad, even or evil or anything like that. But just I know when I'm there, I do X, Y, or Z. Maybe I can't handle alcohol. That's a big one for a lot of people, right? And alcohol is not evil. There's nothing wrong with it. But, there's just something in me maybe that I can't let myself be around it because I can't control myself. That's a huge, incredibly courageous thing to admit. That's not, and it's interesting because, yeah, you're admitting a weakness, but admitting that weakness, admitting that reality, being humble, right? Being humble. We need a lot more of that, I think, in this world, and it needs to start with me, right? Every one of us should be able to say that. We're so quick to point the finger, whoever, all the faults everybody else has. Oh, I hate this person. I can't stand that person. This person's terrible. Oh, that politician is the most evil person who ever lived. Well, maybe, but maybe you're not far behind. Maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm ahead, and I don't want to even admit it. I don't even want to see my faults. I want to point out everybody else's, because let's face it, folks, that's a lot easier to do. It's a lot easier to find, and this is this is in the Bible. Jesus pointed this out. If you're not familiar with it, Jesus gave that parable about that it's very easy for us to point out the splinter in our brother's eye when we have a wooden beam in our own. That idea. We're straining out the gnat but swallowing the camel. There's all these kind of old school, largely Middle Eastern, kind of proverbs like that he uses and little sayings that are really true. And I think it's neat because it really shows the timelessness of some of these observations. So at some level we all kind of know this if we're really honest with ourselves. So anyways, that's a theme. Maybe you've seen it. If you've noticed that or you have thoughts on that, email me. Shoot me an email over at thegraciousguest@gmail.com. I'd love to, kind of get your guys' thoughts on this idea. Have you discovered that theme? You can run but you can't hide. Have you discovered that in a book that you liked? Have you discovered that in a movie or a TV show or some piece of art, an article, whatever, or your own personal experience? Feel free to share, anything you're comfortable sharing with me. I'm just curious just to kind of, figure out how we can all walk this walk together, right? So anyways, that's just a few thoughts I wanted to share today. Thanks for tuning in to the Gracious Guest program. @gracious_guest is the Twitter handle. Feel free to go over there and check that out. And I post all sorts of different stuff about the show or other stuff, family stuff, personal stuff, fun stuff, all sorts of different kinds of stuff over there on Twitter. And as I mentioned, thegraciousguest@gmail.com is the email address. This is The Gracious Guest Show. I'm your host, Mike Creevy, and until next time, don't forget to wonder. Take care.